All right, yes, forecast. So, first of all, just to give you a quick update, I am currently, as much as I can, settled in Colombia as well. As you can probably hear, I'm a little bit ill. It's probably the jet lag, a little bit of stress, etc. All things coming together. So, overall, again, nothing to worry about. I'm back with the forecast, with the breakdown, with the normal videos. We are getting ready for the new enrollment as well. Now, just to give you a heads up on what you can expect in a new enrollment, I think that's quite important, just to get your mind ready, because it's quite a while actually since we've done the last enrollment. And the way I view that is sort of not the old videos don't get outdated, but in the meantime, between one enrollment and the other enrollment, we get so much questions stacked up, etc., that it's almost time exactly for a new enrollment to clarify on every single thing, etc., to make everything very clear, very defined, very objective. And that is exactly the goal with the next enrollment as well. So, to give you a clue, or not a clue, I don't want to speak in riddles or anything, just to give you an update, it will be more videos than a normal enrollment. So it will be very, very full with information. Now, the information will, of course, not be thrown at you in any sense, as in, it will always be clear. And that's exactly my goal as with every enrollment. I just try to make it more clear for you. So that is my goal as well. And we are going to start off with almost the basics, as in I'm going to start off with the PD arrays, how I use them, why I use them, and where I would like to use certain PD arrays. That is quite important for me. Then next thing is, again, market structure is going to be touched on later, etc. So just things to get you prepared, sort of. So if you're struggling almost with the current enrollment, then feel free, well, of course, feel free to watch the current enrollment or that we have. But the next enrollment, just know it's likely going to clear up a lot of things as well to make it more clear. So be prepared for that. Get a fresh notebook. But again, for the people that have been here longer, you already know that a lot of things is going over the same things, just a little bit more defined as well. That is quite important to understand. All right, let's, without further ado, go over the forecast. Now, this is the first day actually that I am looking at the market. And yesterday I had a quick look in the evening, but overall I've not really been getting involved or anything. So on the dollar, currently what we are seeing that daily value gap getting respected, like we talked about last week. Then the next thing I want to see is essentially this discount rate that is right there getting traded into. Now you can probably tell already that here on the weekly, we have a weekly value gap in the making as well. So overall, I am not too certain on if the dollar currently wants to continue lower off of this daily value gap right there, or continue lower off the weekly value gap that it's creating next week. So the reason why that is important is because we might just get a rejection right there, a very short one, to then come into the weekly value gap to then continue lower. So take that into account. So the way I approach this is, again, you can still take a trade. No worries. You can still take that exact trade off that daily value gap lower. The only thing you want to pay attention to is a little bit more to the details. So you want to be very focused, as in, if we are not following through, I want to see that immediately. So again, it leads me back to the 5 stages of probability. The one that sees that as the first one. The first one that sees the low probability in the market. As in, the first person that can identify price not following through off the daily value gap, wanting to trade into the weekly value gap and then continue lower. That is the first one. Not necessarily the best one, but that is the person that is professional and that can overcome without taking a loss first and then can take a winner. That is quite important. That is a stage we need to get to. So that is very important as well. Now, again, this is definitely something I am going to be interested in on certain pairs. Really depends though, really depends on how the setup forms, etc. And the 15-minute ST plus RE needs to be extremely clear. As in, no messing around, just clear ST plus RE. Very, very picky right there. Alright, then on ES, right here, on ES. And in general, the indices, let me go over them in general. The way I view them right now is that I do think with, we are not creating a new daily value gap higher overall off of this previous daily value gap. So the way I view it, and you see I've already marked it out right there, that we might actually come into the weekly value gap right there to then continue higher. So that is, again, that is currently the stage that all the pairs are in, where last week we also had to take into account a potential weekly value gap in the making. But we could clearly tell that last week we just clearly had still the expansion, still the volatility, it still followed through, creating new fair value gaps higher, etc. Where currently it's not doing that. And that is, again, that early sign that we might come into the weekly fair value gap to then continue higher. So, again, doesn't mean that now all your focus should be on the weekly fair value gap only, etc. No. But it's definitely something to take into account right here, where eventually, right here, I might be interested in shorts a little bit more than longs overall, if we are talking about a flow trading plan approach. So flow trading plan approach right here, I might be interested in more shorts right there, going into tomorrow, and potentially tomorrow, when we see we're hovering right here. If we get a new displacement lower in London, etc., and equities open to something like this, then definitely is looking very, very nice overall, because this low can already be our target right there. And that is the same for ES, YM, etc. It's looking quite nice. Overall still bullish, but it's now finding the clear discount rate that we can continue higher from. That is quite important. All right, let's go over DAX. So DAX is the exact same, where we have the same weekly, well, not really. Oh, sorry, this is the monthly, where we have the same weekly status right here. And the weekly, again, can come into that weekly value gap to then potentially continue higher off of that as well. So that is still looking quite interesting, but overall, I want to be very careful here, that we might create a lot of weekly value gaps that we want to trade into. And on Australian dollar, US dollar, so what are we seeing here? We still have this monthly value gap. Now, the monthly value gap is not something, it's a major worry, although it's resistance. So if you have a pair that doesn't have that monthly value gap, or has already overtaken it, something like that, then I would prefer that. Overall, I do still like, right here, the ID of this daily value gap right there, to continue higher. Now as well, we had FOMC today. That is why I waited for a first FOMC drop to then make the forecast. And it's almost like FOMC right here didn't have price agreeing. That's why we didn't see a huge move. So it's almost like we didn't have price agreeing. And once we come into that daily value gap tomorrow, that could be very nice to then continue and sort of explode higher. Could be quite interesting. EU right here. So, by the way, Australian dollar, US dollar is definitely one I'm adding to my list. EU is one I'm currently not really adding to my list. And I do think it can continue higher, don't get me wrong. But the thing here is, we have reached a monthly swing high. As in, we have just reached a premium rate. Of course, we can expect some kind of resistance right there. So, overall, we might want to wait for this weekly value gap right now to then get involved. So, the area here, when coming off that target, with the first discount rate on a daily, it's pretty 50-50, that area. So we need to understand that we need to be a little bit more careful right there. Now, if we want to continue higher, we can still do that. Although I personally don't really see, yes, a very small fair value gap, don't really like that overall. The rejection here of the weekly target that we're getting is almost telling me, if we get a 4-hour premium rate, then I might want to target the daily fair value gap that is sitting right there, and potentially even lower after that. So that is definitely something to take into account right there. All right. Then on GU, what are we seeing? On GU, we have the same scenario, although GU here is a little bit more bullish still into the weekly fair value gap. Again, it's not something you want to trade off of currently, unless you get a disrespect boundary, like we saw on EU. But this is something that you can use as target and still understand that we might reject there a little bit. So you don't want to look for 1-hour fair value gap longs inside that when we're just coming off the target right there. That's not very smart. So right here, again, this does not really look like a top to me, just purely based on the intention, etc. right there. But overall, we still need to take into account that it can continue lower a little bit. Now, this does look pretty nice, depending on where it closes tomorrow. Because if it closes like this, that's a pretty high close for it to then come into the daily value gap tomorrow to then continue higher. That is, how do you call it? That is where it needs a lot of volatility to actually pull that off. So if it does, of course, then be my guest. I'm still interested. If it doesn't and it's still very far away, then I'm likely not interested. New Zealand dollar, US dollar. I will add it to the list, by the way. GU. New Zealand dollar, US dollar. So overall, we also have this monthly value gap right there. We can still continue higher. We still have that resistance, of course. We can continue higher with this daily value gap. Still looks pretty good overall. It's, again, the same premise with the dollar, etc., taking that into account, but does look quite all right. USD Canadian dollar. Now, right here. Excuse me. Now, right here, I had marked out this previous day low, and the reason for that is because if it expands lower, below that, of course, then that creates a daily fair value gap potentially, which currently it does not want to do. So here, I do not want to get involved overall. Don't like the price action. It's very seek and destroy. It's almost this, what do they call it in retail, like this triangle or flag pattern right there, which I don't really like. All right, then USD CHF right here did not come into the daily fair value gap, like we mentioned last week as well, which is not that crazy, but overall it's not creating a new daily fair value gap lower as well. So I want either a new daily fair value gap higher or lower right here before I look at anything. USD JPY. So right here we reached this low that is sitting right there. Now overall we can still look to potentially take shorts off of this daily fair value gap lower right there. Although it's the same premise with the dollar in mind, with that weekly fair value gap in mind on the dollar as well. It's like, do you want to trade this currently? It's not super high probability in my opinion. It's a little bit low probability in my opinion. So the highest probability is of course waiting for the dollar to come into the weekly fair value gap to then continue lower if it wants to do that overall. So here again, use JPY. It's not super high probability right now in my eyes. I would prefer something else. Then silver. Silver is looking quite interesting. Now we have this daily fair value gap overlapping with the highs right there. So if on the 4-hour right now, we can continue higher off of that. Ooh, we actually had marked out the gray area you're seeing right there was the potential 4-hour fair value gap, which we came all the way lower right there and created a very small fair value gap, which is not something I like. If we can continue higher right there, then we, of course, can go into the 5-minute right there to look for a potential ST plus re, potentially going into tomorrow as well. So if tomorrow we have nice price action higher, definitely something that we can look for longs at. So overall, I do quite like silver. Don't really like the small fair value gap, but it is looking pretty nice, to be honest. I'll add it to the list. Then gold right here. Same exact scenario where we have daily right there taken. I do think we can take drawn liquidity right there before we create a new daily fair value gap. So on the 4-hour here, this 4-hour fair value gap is quite interesting already to potentially push price higher. It's quite interesting. Quite interesting price action here. On the 5-minute, let's see what it's doing. Again, I would not enter right now anymore, of course. So I would wait for tomorrow and then just use this as your context low right there to then just follow the lows with the fair value gaps. That is quite important. All right. Quite interesting. Bitcoin is the opposite of interesting. It's absolutely atrocious right now, and I still want to wait for either daily fair value gap higher or lower. It's currently just not really clear on what it wants to do. Then crude oil is very interesting in my opinion, and you can probably see why. Last week, we had this move lower right there, taking out this low. Now, we have a very aggressive move lower, where I do think we have that disrespect boundary right now, which means that overall, this is now the protected low right there, and this is the target low. That creates, again, your context. So here, we have the daily fair value gap in the making, which if we can trade into that, I would definitely look at longs. Because this is pretty high probability. This is very high probability in my eyes. On the 4-hour, we also came into 4-hour fair value gaps right there. But it seems like we are waiting for the daily fair value gap. Now, if we do not come into the daily fair value gap and we already expand higher overall, creating a new 4-hour fair value gap, then again, I would like to potentially get involved of that 4-hour fair value gap. Other than that, I would want to wait for the daily fair value gap, which could be very, very nice. So I'll definitely add it to the list. Nifty right here can just look to continue higher, reach the target, and next target is this high right there. So can even wait for the weekly fair value gap to then continue higher off of that as well. Let's take a look. I have zero pairs on the short list actually. It's quite interesting. And I have a few right here on the long list, 10 of them, which the first one is Australian dollar, Canadian dollar. I've not actively looked at the economic calendar, so I'm not too sure on what I do want to trade tomorrow. Let me actually pull up the economic calendar just to make it a little bit more clear. Let's see. Tomorrow we have JPY bank holiday. We have Australian dollar news. Then we have US dollar news and unemployment claims. Australian dollar, GBP, US dollar, Canadian dollar. All right, we have a little bit of everything. Nice. So Australian dollar can definitely be traded right here. So on the weekly, we are just continuing higher, which with this target potentially in mind. Then on the daily, the thing I saw right here is that I would want to wait with the drawn liquidity being that close, nothing really to reach for anymore. So as in no fair value gap to be mitigated right there to continue lower. So right here, a daily fair value gap is very interesting to potentially continue higher off of right there. That is very, very nice price action currently. I do really like that. Really like that. Looks very interesting. So it's definitely something I'm going to keep an eye on. Australian dollar CHF. Now, this I added this one yesterday actually, and yesterday in the evening, and I currently don't like it anymore, and I'll explain why. It's because I was looking at this price action right there. This price action, there's a very clear drawn liquidity currently, which is this daily fair value gap. So any 4-hour fair value gap right there, or any 1-hour fair value gap right there to continue higher into the daily fair value gap is definitely something I was interested in. And even daily fair value gap potentially being created, which we did not do right there. So overall, right now, I need to catch my breath. Overall, I do not want to get involved anymore right here, because this daily fair value gap is not really interesting. Now we're pretty much stuck in that 50-50 price action again. So I do not want to get involved here. So I'll add it to the breakdown list as well. Euro Canadian dollar, let's see. So this was also interesting if we were creating a daily fair value gap higher. Now again, leads to the same story where we can now create a weekly fair value gap higher, which could eventually again be interesting. But right here, no daily fair value gaps to work with. So here I would wait the rest of this week for this weekly fair value gap to be created. Add it to the breakdown list. GBP Canadian dollar, let's see. Oh. All right, let's see. So here we have potential weekly fair value gap in the making as well. Then on the daily, we are also creating this daily fair value gap right there. So both could be quite nice. First, of course, try to trade off this daily fair value gap. If, and with trying, and that sounds very sad, but with trying, I mean, try to see if it wants to follow through. If it doesn't, and you have very early signs, then please do not trade it. So right there, I would like to look at higher prices overall. It's quite interesting. Australian dollar, US dollar, we went over, and the rest we also went over. Now let's put it into an interest list. I really like GBP Canadian dollar and Australian dollar Canadian dollar. GBP Canadian dollar, I like a little bit more. And the reason for that is because Australian dollar Canadian dollar here has this a little bit more aggressive move lower. Again, doesn't mean it can't expand higher. It's just me being very picky that I like this a little bit more right now. So, because it's more bullish intention overall. Now, both will be interesting tomorrow. Australian dollar, US dollar will also be interesting, but not at the top of my interest list. GU will also be interesting, but not at the top. New Zealand dollar, US dollar, also not at the top. Silver would be above these right there, not above Australian dollar, US dollar. Gold would also be above them, and crude oil would actually be very high and would be the third right there. Mainly because if it comes into that, I would definitely want to get involved potentially. It looks very nice. All right, perfect. Oh, wait, ho. The waiting list, GBP, JPY. So here we are coming inside. We're coming into that weekly fair value gap right there. And right now we can look to potentially continue higher off of that because, of course, this is sort of, again, the last line of defense without it being the last line of actual defense. It's that last boundary where sort of the disrespect gets activated and where you would look at lower prices. So if it wants to go lower, this is the last area that is going to either hold price or push price lower. So right there on the daily time frame, we're seeing a rejection, which means we don't really have a fair value gap lower, a very small one, but again, not really interested. 4 hour, we're getting a nice rejection higher. So this is actually pretty nice to add to the long list overall, and it's pretty high probability in my eyes as well. So definitely interested. Even with JPY bank holiday tomorrow, with GBP news, it's perfectly fine to trade still. So 4 hour, 1 hour right here. 1 hour had an ST, and currently it's creating that re as well. Very interesting, very nice price action overall. Looking very nice. All right, now that is the forecast. All right, perfect. Thank you.